Have you ever wondered what the Bible refuses to say about Earth before humanity? Genesis opens with mystery, not clarity. In the beginning, God created the heavens and earth, but the very next verse shifts tone entirely. Now the earth was formless and void. Darkness covered the face of the deep. Notice the word now. Something changed between verse 1 and verse 2. The grammar suggests condition, not creation. Most people assume God made a perfect world and rested, but the text doesn't actually say that. It says the earth became formless and empty. The Hebrew words tohu va-vohu describe chaos. These same words appear in Isaiah 34:11. There Isaiah describes judgment and punishment. In Jeremiah 4:23, identical language for devastation, not pristine creation, but desolate aftermath. And this linguistic pattern matters deeply. If God's first act was let there be light, why darkness? Why did light need commanding into existence? The darkness wasn't natural. It was imposed. Something had to have caused it. Something broke what was already made. The gap isn't just grammatical, it's cosmological. Consider what Genesis 1:28 says to Adam, "Be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth." Most people read replenish as simple population, but the Hebrew word mala means fill or restore. The distinction matters enormously. You don't replenish what was never diminished. Replenish means restore to previous condition. Replenish assumes something was already there, something removed, destroyed, or depopulated. Why would God use restoration language for humanity's first moment? The choice of words invites question. Job 15:7 contains a cryptic reference most skip. Are you the first man born? Were you made before the hills? Eliphaz asks Job as rhetorical challenge. The implication is, someone predates the mountains. Someone existed when geography was being laid. This isn't poetic exaggeration. It's theological argument. They're saying you talk like you witnessed creation. If no one existed before Adam, why frame it this way? The language assumes pre-Adamic existence. Proverbs 8:22-31 deepens this further. Wisdom speaks in first person about creation. The Lord possessed me in the beginning of his way, before his works of old. I was set up when there were no depths. I was brought forth before the mountains. Before the hills I existed. Wisdom describes witnessing multiple epochs of creation. She watches Earth's foundations being laid. She watches the sea's boundaries being established. Then she says, I was daily his delight, rejoicing always before him. This is no longer metaphorical, this is witness testimony. Wisdom celebrates creation itself, stage by stage. If nothing existed before Adam, why this structure? Why use the language of ages and epochs? The text invites contemplation, not dismissal. Now consider Ezekiel 28:12-17. With fresh attention, God addresses the king of Tyre. You were the seal of perfection, full of wisdom. You were in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone was your covering. Your settings prepared the day you were created. You were the anointed cherub who covers. You were on the holy mountain of God. You walked amid stones of fire. You were perfect from the day you were created, till iniquity was found in you. This isn't about an earthly king. This is cosmic. This describes a being of unfathomable power and beauty. By abundance of trading you sinned. Therefore I cast you as profane from the mountain I destroyed you, O covering cherub. The destruction is explicit, the judgment total. A being of immense authority fell and was cast down. Isaiah 14:12-15 parallels this narrative. How you are fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, how you are cut down to the ground. For you said in your heart, I will ascend. I will make myself like the Most High. Yet you shall be brought down to Sheol. The rebellion is rebellion against order itself. The fall is expulsion from authority and dominion. Now connect the timeline. Genesis 1:2 describes the earth as flooded and dark. What if this darkness came immediately after Satan's expulsion? What if the flood wasn't metaphorical but cosmological? What if Satan's rebellion didn't just affect heaven but earth itself? The pattern appears repeatedly in Scripture. Genesis 1:2 shows water and darkness covering the planet. Genesis 7 shows Noah's flood as judgment. Revelation describes final judgment through water and fire. God's judgment pattern uses water as reset. Water represents both death and purification. Water unmakes the old order, prepares the new. If Satan was expelled and earth became his domain, that explains Genesis 1:2. The darkness wasn't natural. It was consequence. The water wasn't formless, randomness. It was divine response to rebellion. God then spoke restoration into existence. Let there be light. Light breaks the imposed darkness. Light reveals what the water had hidden. The 6 days aren't creation from nothing. They're restoration and rebuilding. God restructures a broken world. God repopulates a devastated planet. God establishes order over the chaos that rebellion created. This explains the missing dinosaurs. Where are dinosaurs in Genesis 1 and 2? They are absent from the restored creation. They belong to the first world, the first creation that God destroyed, the pre-Adamic civilization that existed before judgment. When archaeologists discover dinosaur fossils, they're finding remnants of that previous age. They're not finding evidence against the Bible. They are finding evidence that Earth's geological history predates Adam. Adam wasn't the first being. He was the first of a new humanity. Genesis 1:27 says God made mankind in his image. Male and female, he created them. Then God said, be fruitful and multiply, replenish the earth. Adam and Eve are the first humans of this restored creation, not the first beings on earth, the first humans in God's new order. The genealogies trace this new humanity through time. They don't trace all of Earth's history. They trace redeemed humanity's lineage. This explains why Genesis seems to skip billions of years, because Genesis isn't cataloging Earth's full history. It's revealing the history of redemption. It's showing God's purpose for humanity. Specifically, Adam's genealogy matters, because Adam begins the line toward Christ, not because Adam was literally the first thing created. Why does Satan still have authority in the New Testament? Jesus called Satan the prince of this world. Now is the judgment of this world. Now the prince will be cast out. If Satan was cast from heaven, why authority on earth? Because God allowed him to operate within limits on this restored world. Just as God allowed Satan to test Job, just as God allowed Satan to tempt Jesus in the wilderness, God permits Satan's activity within boundaries. Satan's authority here is permitted, not absolute. Satan can corrupt and tempt, but cannot ultimately control what God protects. This explains why Satan seems so invested in earth and human rebellion. This world isn't his original domain. His original domain is lost, but God has allowed him access to this one until the final judgment, until Revelation's end. Then Satan will be cast into the lake of fire, finally, completely. The water judgment pattern becomes clear. Now Genesis 1:2. Water covering a destroyed world in darkness. This is judgment. This is reset. This is consequence. God speaks order back into existence. Genesis 7, water. Noah's flood is judgment on human corruption. Again, water brings death and reset. Again, God preserves a remnant to continue the restored creation's purpose. Revelation's final judgment, water and fire, and cosmic upheaval. Again, judgment. Again, reset. Again, consequence for rebellion. The pattern isn't random. It's redemptive architecture. God uses water to wipe clean, to start again, to judge and restore. The philosophical tension dissolves when you see this framework. How can Earth be ancient and Genesis be true? Because Genesis isn't describing Earth's full age, it's describing redemptive history. How can dinosaurs exist and the Bible be literal? Because they existed in the pre-Adamic creation that was destroyed. How can Satan still have power if he was cast out? Because God permitted him limited authority on a restored world. Why does Genesis seem to skip billions of years? Because it's not trying to explain all of history, just humanity's purpose. Why the strange language of replenish instead of fill? Because the earth was being restored, not created from nothing. Why does darkness precede light in Genesis 1, 2, 3? Because judgment and chaos preceded God's restorative work. This isn't heresy, it's careful reading. The gap theory has ancient roots in Christian thought. Origen, Augustine, and other church fathers explored similar ideas. Thomas Chalmers developed the gap theory in the 19th century, not as rebellion against Scripture, but as theological synthesis. How do we reconcile the Bible's claims with observable evidence? We listen to what the text actually says. We notice when grammar suggests condition, not creation. We observe when words like replenish appear instead of fill. We read the cosmic rebellion narrative in Ezekiel and Isaiah. We don't force modern interpretations onto ancient texts. We allow Scripture to speak on its own terms. What does this mean for how you read the Bible? It means paying attention to small words and grammatical shifts. It means asking why certain terms appear at crucial moments. It means noticing what's absent, like dinosaurs in Genesis. It means holding complexity without collapsing into either extreme, not dismissing the Bible as mythology, not forcing it into false scientific conformity, but listening carefully to what it actually claims. Genesis tells the story of restoration, not creation, from absolute nothing. It tells the story of humanity's role in a world scarred by rebellion. It tells the story of God's patience with a cosmos bent toward chaos. It tells the story of why you inherit both blessing and struggle. You're made in God's image. You're part of the restored creation. But you live in a world where Satan still corrupts, where darkness still presses against light, where the tension between restoration and rebellion still shapes everything. The question becomes, what does God intend for you in this restored world? Adam didn't just populate Earth. He was called to steward it, to tend the garden, to name the creatures, to exercise dominion. That's still your inheritance even now. You're called to restore, to rebuild, to speak order into chaos, not through your own power, but through alignment with God's restorative purpose. The water judgment pattern shows that God resets what becomes corrupted. The 6 days of restoration show that God rebuilds patiently. The genealogy of humanity shows that God preserves a line toward redemption. That line reaches Jesus and extends through you. You're part of the most recent phase of God's restoration plan. Not the first phase, not the final phase, but this one right now. Consider your own life through this lens. When you feel broken, are you sensing the reality of pre-Adamic devastation? When you struggle with darkness, are you experiencing the consequences of Satan's rebellion? When you hunger for order and meaning, are you responding to the call of restoration? You're not separate from this cosmic narrative. You're embedded in it, shaped by it, called to participate in it. The Bible isn't just giving you history. It's giving you your identity. You're made in the image of God. You're part of His restored creation. You're called to steward, to rebuild, to speak light into darkness. Not because you have power in yourself, but because you're aligned with His purpose. The darkness that covered the deep before creation was spoken into order. The darkness that covered Noah's world before a new covenant was established. The darkness that will cover creation's final judgment before eternal restoration. And the darkness that presses against you now, that same light still speaks into it. Let there be light. Those words didn't stop in Genesis 1:3. They're still being spoken, still being embodied, still being extended through restoration, through rebuilding, through the patient work of redemption. That's your call, that's your identity. That's the deep story the Bible is telling you. Listen carefully, the gap between verses 1 and 2 contains a mystery. But the mystery isn't there to confuse you. It's there to invite deeper reading, deeper faith, deeper participation in what God has always been doing. Restoring, rebuilding, redeeming, even now, even in you,